Greetings! It's I, Countess Naraman Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. I hope all of you are having a great day, whether you're joining me over on Twitch Live, pointing over there correctly, or of course later on YouTube. So, hello YouTube, you guys, please remember to like, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment, all that kind of stuff. Today, we're heading to Molthune. Of course, my question is, have you done adventures here? Because Molthune's an interesting country on the shores of Lake Incarthen. I've talked about a number of countries around this region, and of course the history, we've got the Whispering Tyrant and all these other things here, but I haven't dived into Molthune yet, and we will talk about their rival in the future, Nirthmas, or Nirthmas, but we do have to talk about it a bit today. So why don't we just dive into talking about Molthune today and learn all about it, so you have a general idea. So what sources do I use, and where can I look more deeper into this? Well, of course, I always say that you can start out by checking the wiki sites online. They do a pretty good job of giving some basic information, but for further research, the following books for 1st and 2nd edition are recommended. The Campaign Settings book and the Inner Sea World Guides are some good basic information on them, with the Lands of Conflict talking specifically about these two nations that I've just mentioned, Molthune and their rival. And of course, the Lost Omens World Guide, it will update on that. So, when we start talking about Molthune, we have to give her some basics of it. It is a very powerful nation in the region of Lake Incarthen. It's on the rise, and it does this by being a military power. The problem it has is a lot of its ambitions and wanting to be the next Haldane Empire is limited. Now, it does things as it has encouraging immigration and lists members into its national army. That might not last because of things that have happened, but all this is trying to build them up as a military power. They're doing their best, and they are a military oligarchy. Now we're going to talk about a little bit about what Molthune is. I would talk about their history first, but I want to talk about the actual country first. Give you an idea of what's there. So it's in central Avastian, on the shores of Lake Incarthen, nestled in between incredibly powerful nations. That's its problem. It's kind of an ideal area for a superpower. In other ways, it's not. It's the fact that it is in a very usable location physically, but the nations around it aren't great. It's bordered by Druma, that unassailable merchant nation that ends up being too much of a valuable trading partner to invade, along with the Chelaxian-backed nation of Isgar, and of course the south and west, separating by the Mandor Mountains, is Cheliax. And of course, Niddle, who have an unholy alliance of Shadow Touch Priests and Hellspawn Devils. So, these are 4 nations that are not great to involve for people with military ambition. All they have to possibly beat up and take over is a nation, we talk about in a minute, was once part of them, no longer is, Nirthmas, to their north. And it's the primary focus of this aggression. Of course, adding to this now is the newly incorporated Hobgoblin nation of Oprak, which is at its northwest. So we have yet another nation, but that's for different reasons. So what's here? If we talk about first the forests and the territories, there's the Bakar Forest, the Dustshroud Forest, the Shriekwood, Witherbark Forest, the mountains, Mendor Mountains, Mindspin Mountains, the Umbral Basin. It's all good. For the lakes and rivers, there's the Hungry Maw River, Ink Maw River, of course Lake Incarthen itself, and Nosem River, and the plains of Molthune, where a lot of their actual pretty major thing of raising food is. Now, they have 9 provinces. Save for kind of a lost one in Nirthmas, but that's a different thing. Each of these provinces has a general lord. We'll talk about that when we talk about the government. But I'm going to basically give a bit of information about the different places that you can go to. So Canaret is, of course, the first of the territories. It is also where the capital, Canarat, is. It is looked over by Marquin Teldis, who is the imperial governor of Molthune, and the territorial governor of Canarat. The major cities in Canarat, of course, are Canarat, the capital. It has architecture that's very splendorous. Molthune right now. With defensive fortifications mixing in with, very good architecture. So it's sort of like it's practical architecture they go for. Even the poor of Canarat are said to live in a bit of luxury. And this is certainly to an extent true. Citizens are allowed to select a number of laborers, talk about that, to live in fine accommodations in order to encourage them to settle in the city. Its most exclusive district is the Sweet Orchard. Non-residents are not allowed in this exclusive section without valid work or travel permits. The imperial castle is at the center, where the imperial governor rules from a war room in the castle, and the pride of this palace is a large-scale model of the Inner Sea region, which the generals will plot their next campaigns. It also has one of the largest populations of halflings in the Inner Sea regions, and the halflings are famous for their skilled sculptors and artisans, who build many of these great beauties, beautiful buildings. That's Canarat. Now we move on to the next of the regions, and that's, of course, Bakar, with Garen Jarek as territorial governor, which if you're going to look at what places are there, the territorial seat is, of course, Tripolin, a city that's there, with a smaller village of Haladon in that area, near the Bakar forest. Halfway between Canarat and Braganza. I'm going to butcher some of these words. I really will. Now we move on, of course, to the Dustdroud. The Dustdroud, we have Walder Breskit as its current general lord. And, of course, its seat of power is Arannus, which is on the shore of Lake Encartha, the second largest city in Molthune, and is where the navy is put out. Its fleet is the largest on the lake. Its main role is to blockade Tamaran, the capital of the rebel nation of Nirthmas. So, take that as you will for that one. Then we have Meredith, or the Border as it's known as, which we have Resper Cyrano as a territorial governor of this area, and its main territorial seat is Fort Ramgate. I haven't really thought about that yet. Been busy with a bunch of stuff, but I will. It's a frontier place near the Meredith River Valley. Big fortifications. It's basically tested on a daily basis by forces from Nirmaths. It's basically the area where the two armies, or kind of the two forces, generally meet. Of course, then, we have the territory of Mendor with Irina Klim as its governor. And its city there is Sednigny. Sedney? It was formerly an independent city-state that was annexed by Molthune, actually, in 4708. So, not long ago. Basically, yeah, that's not very long ago. That's 16 years ago. So, yeah, rolled over like 16 years. Basically, the city was beset by plague and famine, and the youngest general lord set up this city-state as the new ruler. The locals do chaff their new servitude. The traditional Free City Citizens Militia continues to protect the city independently of the general lords, and the friction between the locals and the national forces could lead to violence here. So, yeah. So there's some things going on in that region. And then, of course, we have Mindspin, which is named after Mindspin Mountains, the usual one, with its general lord of Patra Sebin. Its seat of power, its traditional territorial seat, is Braganza, which is on the western edge of the country, and one of the centers of worship of Avadar in the region. Other settlements in that region are, of course, Buttermilk Creek, Gillet, Oxbow, and Valor. The plains are looked after by Harwin Heron, who's that territorial governor, and its seat of power is, of course, Westher, which is a military garrison and the seat of power there. You can do some suggestions, too. I would say probably put those into the... I have to... If you join the Discord or something like that. But maybe message me those. Trade Cross is a small collection of farmhouses and plains that's also in that region. We have two more governors to talk about. We have, of course, the Shriekwood territory with its general lord, Vernus, Lokarkinos? I'm going to butcher some of these names. Who's the governor of Shriekwood. Message and Twitch. I do have the Discord stuff, so message it. I forgot to, sorry. Korhalam is its territorial seat. It's said it's the gateway to Molthune. And see the first so-called first general lord on the Nossum River. Korm is also the largest port on Lake Incarthy. And doesn't have the military size of it, but is the largest port. And finally, there's the Umbral Basin, which Francine Maga is the territorial governor, and Doommark is that territorial seat of power there. But the Bloodsworn Vale is also in that region. So that's a general look at Molthune. Let's talk about its history, because its history is actually very new. And I wanted to move on to the history to talk about these two, because these two are a Molthone soldier and the Marathi ranger. Two nations that are at war with each other. And why is this? Well, we have to go back to the founding of Molthune as a territory, because it was first defined as a particular region as part of the Chelaxian Empire in 4305, when King Halid III, during his wars of expansion in Cheliax's history. But as a free nation, it really has been more recent. And like many other nations in this region, began with the death of Eredin, and Cheliax declined, when the factions of the Cheliax began to splitter after the death of the patron god in 4606. Molthune, under its governor Kellen, took advantage of this, declared independence in 4632. Its struggle for independence later inspired many other Chelish provinces like Andor and Galt to do the same. To bring order within its own borders, it established itself as a military oligarchy controlled by 9 general lords, and heavy taxes are put on to fund the military. The elites living in Canaret and other southern cities largely benefited from these taxes, while in the north, they're very burdensome, tyrannical, and that dissatisfaction grew to all-out rebellion. And that's where things change. The rebellious folks who dwelt around the Fangwood in northern Molthune basically had been repressed under Cheliax's rule. They wanted freedom. They were like, we're free with Molthune. And then the oppression continued. So those few years that they were there weren't great. So in 46-48, these northern Molthune people began a violent rebellion called the Freedom War. And the Northern Rebellion in the south, it was called. It took a few short years, but these rebels won, and the nation of Nirthmes was born. And Molthune's territory was split in half at its founding, pretty much. It's not the end of hostilities, though. It's basically, it heralded conflict in a new direction. Ever since Nirthmes' founding, Molthune's been just trying to get it back and conquer it again. And the most recent Imperial Governor, Mark Teldis, has a lot of policies that kind of aim towards the invasion of Nirthmes. That would be kind of where it is, but we have to turn to some recent events. We'll talk about a few others, but in the big recent events in the region, of course, the founding of the Hobgoblin nation of Orpak in 4717 on Molthune's northwestern borders, and then, of course, in 4719, the Whispering Tyrant, re-emerging as a military threat, have basically switched everything. So the last effectively 7 years have changed the way Molthune's policies and political calculus and military have. There had been a defeat of the Molthune army by the Hobgoblin forces of General Azarazi, and this was written off as the fault of the commanders in charge rather than the Molthune as a whole. And this defeat did lead to a little bit of soul-searching finger-pointing. Some generals believed that it's time to bring the war with Nirmath to its close, or even negotiate an alliance with their long-term foe in order to deal with Orprak and the Whispering Tyrant. Others warned that only a complete defeat of Orprak, the Whispering Tyrant, and Nirmath will save Molthune from a terrible loss of faith after the humiliating defeats. The direction is basically kind of up in the air. There's arguments about which is going to be better to, go all-out war, just keep with it, or, make some peace in the region. It's basically the outgoing conflict in Nirmath has reached a cooling-off period because they're they don't know necessarily if they're going to, do something. It's been, a kind of, simple, colder war. Getting into that, full-blown war, not reached that point in time yet. They haven't decided on it. Maybe they'll do that. Maybe that's the big thing they need to do. Maybe they won't. Some other recent events is the Imperial Governor did declare the Pathfinder Society an enemy of the state in 4706 because they opened a lodge in the Nirmathi capital. Pathfinders still sneak in to check the ruins and mysterious locales. And of course in 4710, a bunch of smaller villages were destroyed by fire and lightning reported after a massive dragon flew north from Gloom. And those are the big things about it. So it's a nation that doesn't have a lot other than being settled by people of Kaldane/Cheliax descent up until 4305, where it's enough of you living there that I guess you're a territory. I guess so. You guys are all together now. You're a territory. We'll throw a governor on top of you. Look after you. Let's talk about the government. And here is actually one of the General Lords. This is Francine Maga, who I, of course, had mentioned was in charge of Umbral Basin. Just as a note here, she is technically the spy master of Niddle. Keep that in mind about this lady here. She's revered as the hero of Doommark, has her ravens accompany her. Maybe everyone doesn't trust her, but she is well respected as being a master spy. Oh, well, I'll take a look. So, what's in this government here? Well, of course, you do have your Imperial Governor, Mark Winteldis, who is chosen, like all Imperial Governors, by the Molthune Imperial Army. Below the Governor are the 9 General Lords, which each tend the various areas of the country. Effectively, what happens is, because these General Lords are the heads of the army, when the previous Imperial Governor passes away, they choose a new one from amongst their positions. It could be the person that's replacing the Imperial General, the new one. It could be one of their older ones. But the position is chosen for life. So one of their own, one of those 9, becomes the Imperial Governor on top of everything. And they might switch the regions they're in at that point and that kind of thing. The absolute rule of the military is not popular. And despite what a lot of critics say, each of these General Lords is an efficient statesman. They are far better suited to ongoing hostilities with Nirmath and managing their territorial ambition of Molthune than civilian governors would be, but they are efficient statesmen. So they do keep things in order. So, some issues, but not as much. And I mentioned the 9 provinces as they're divided, and kind of went through them. And you just have to remember, we also have to mention their diplomacy, because they don't really have diplomacy. Not necessarily. Everybody isn't an ally. They're basically enemies to be conquered. So there's a lot of aggressive belligerence there, but the only people that they're really targeting are Nirmath, because they're weak, we can conquer them. The diplomacy they do engage in is basically because we can't easily subjugate you. like Druma and its economic influence, Isgar and its Chelaxian power, again, Molthune's still looking for that opportunity to seize on things. So if they see weakness, bam, they're going after you. Now, they do have a robust workforce, and a lot of advantageous trade agreements. So they have a dominance in shipping and transportation throughout this region. The loss of fertile lands in Last Wall and the influx of refugees have actually made food supply the most sought-after import in the region. You got a pretty good region for growing that. Now, Lake Encartha remains bustling in its waterways, but with the Whispering Tyrant on the Island of Terror, a lot of merchant ships and even pirates and stuff stay close to the shores, so things have changed a little bit, but they still send a lot of stuff the long way around the lake. There's a nice captain of the Imperial Army. Who is there? Well, we should talk first about our humans, because they are the main population here. They're settled by a human nation. You've got to remember that, Their primary descent is Chelaxian humans, and they are divided by a rigid class system that separates their people into two people: Imperial citizens and laborers. Imperial citizens generally live in the cities, larger towns, Canarant, Aramas, and places like that, and are people that have wealth and privilege. They're allowed to trade with foreigners, move freely around Molthune, participate in local government. Laborers have access to none of these privileges and act as indentured servants who labor in the farms and forests in Royal Molthune. Now, beneath both these classes are slaves. Slavery is in Molthune, but the ownership is strictly regulated, and Molthune slaves do actually have the ability to free themselves of servitude and become full citizens with proper legal education. It's a lengthy process. The fact that it exists, though, means that the slaves have more future in Molthune than most other slaveholding nations, actually. It's not forbidden, actually, for slaves to carry weapons openly in Molthune. It is an unusual sight. So it's one of those interesting things is, it is a slave nation, but they do have this legal recourse built into their system for you to get out of that. It's an interesting thing that they've set this up. Now, there is other paths to citizenship, even from amongst the laborer class, because Governor Taldus proclaimed in 4710, any laborer who serves 5 years in the armies can become an imperial citizen, which helped swell the army's ranks. It was kind of unpopular with the country's ruling classes, but was kind of a necessity seen that way, especially by Taldus, who needs more citizens to take full advantage of their great wealth of their national resources, basically. They're like, we don't have enough citizens to take advantage of what we're doing here. The army also does accept foreign and monstrous soldiers. Hobgoblins, centaurs, and lycanthropes have been accepted into it. This practice has seen heavy criticism after General Azarasi took advantage of those troops to raise her Ironfang Legion and start the Ironfang invasion. Immigration is also eligible. Last Wall refugees have flocked to Molthune as a result. And proof of earned citizenship actually comes in the form of a large iron coin with a number and a red flag of Molthune. Those who have earned the red coin are unpopular with the aristocratic elite, but they have swelled the ranks of Molthune's military forces. So in addition to humans, there are a sizable amount of halflings. Similar to in Cheliax, halflings here are mostly kept as slaves. But Molthune's independence and their path to independence and freedom have made it much easier for these halflings to win their freedom. Many of them through years of hard work or military service. So free Molthune halflings are often found as rural laborers. Canterbury has a large population, if they're artisans, of course. But if you look outside the cities, in the wildlands, there's Fays of the Backtar Forest, which honestly Pathfinders like to head to. In the Shriekwood, you have mites, kobolds, ogres, Grimscon Cambions, who have blood influenced by daemons, are drawn to the war-torn borders between Molthune and Nearthmas. So yeah. And that's who's in Molthune. And that's where we'll leave it today. I hope you enjoyed learning about Molthune. it's an interesting nation in the Lycan Carthan region, because it is an aggressive nation. It is a military nation, and a nation that wants to become an empire, but it's just surrounded by powerful beings and places. It's just not in a situation where it can become an empire, not at least right now. Again, not for a lack of perhaps trying, but it's just this interesting situation that they found themselves in. Currently, yeah, they have their aggressions, but things are going on. Oprak's been formed, the Whispering Time's back, and they've just got to find a way to do stuff. So, this military nation that's been very aggressive in this region for the past 100 years, doing a little soul-searching. What will that mean for the nation? I don't know. But you can see, in trying to build their military, they're building better lives for their people and more acceptance of a lot of other beings. And it has burned them a little bit, but not necessarily completely. And it's just this weird thing of they're becoming more accepting and changing because they need military strength. They want more army. It's an interesting trading position. I do like that their very need might drive them to evolve in ways they don't understand. Doesn't mean you can't be a military nation, but it might change things in the way they perceive things, in the way they do things. And certainly, they're thinking about it right now. But we'll leave it here. That'll be it for today. I think we can leave Molthune and its military might for a little bit. If you enjoyed this video, remember to check out all my other stuff if you're looking to join me live. It's Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, early afternoons for when I talk about tabletop. All that goes up on YouTube. Wednesdays at 9 p.m. in the evening is Crimson Queen. We're playing a adapted version of the Crimson Throne Adventure Path of First Edition. So that's a big Pathfinder game set nearby to here. Discussing tabletop on Saturdays at 6. We talk about news of the week and a lot of things like that. And of course, all that stuff goes up on YouTube. I have my social media, Discord, Twitter link down below. And yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back for more in the future. But until that next time, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.